The United States developed the first nuclear weapons during World War II in cooperation with the United Kingdom as well as Canada as part of the Manhattan Project, out of fear that Nazi Germany would develop them first. The US remains the only country to have used nuclear weapons in war, and that was when they destroyed the Japanese cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Today, the US has between 6,800 and 7,000 nuclear weapons. Next country is Russia. So the former Soviet Union was the second nation to have developed and tested a nuclear weapon. Now, what sparked the Soviets to develop these weapons was to achieve a balance of power during the Cold War. After the Soviet Union was dissolved in 1991, Soviet weapons entered officially into the possession of the Russian Federation. Their nuclear weapons arsenal is said to number about 7,000 weapons total, so around the same as the United States. The third nation is the United Kingdom, and they were the third country in the world after the US and the Soviet Union to develop and test nuclear weapons. Its program was motivated to have an independent deterrent against the Soviet Union, while also maintaining its status as a great power. Currently, they have a total of 215 nuclear weapons. Moving on now to France. So France tested its first nuclear weapon in 1960, based mostly on its own research. It was motivated to become a nuclear power in order to retain great power status alongside the United Kingdom during the post-colonial Cold War. The current number of nuclear weapons that they have is 300. France has been one of the topmost countries who have urged to everyone else the importance of nuclear deterrence in a highly dangerous world. The fifth nation in this video is China. So China tested its first nuclear weapon device in 1964 at the Lopner test site. The weapon was developed as a deterrent against both the United States and the Soviet Union. 2 years later, China had a fission bomb capable of being put onto a nuclear missile. The current number of weapons that they have is 270 nuclear weapons. Nation number 6 is India, and they first tested their nuclear explosive device in 1974. And it was that test that sparked Pakistan to really ramp up work on its secret nuclear weapons program. India and Pakistan both publicly demonstrated their nuclear weapons capability with a round of tit-for-tat nuclear tests around May of 1998. And in their possession, India currently has 130 nuclear weapons. Nation number 7 in this video, of course, Pakistan. And Pakistan's nuclear weapon dates back to the 1970s, and of course it was sparked by India's nuclear weapons test in 1974. Pakistan is believed to have about 130 to 140 nuclear warheads. Pakistan is currently expanding its nuclear arsenal faster than any other country and developing a new delivery system for its warheads. And now the second last country in this video is Israel. But Israel has not publicly conducted a nuclear test, and it does not admit or deny having any nuclear weapons. And they state that it will not be the first to introduce nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Nevertheless, Israel is universally believed to possess nuclear arms, although it's unclear exactly how many. Estimates suggest they have around 80 nuclear weapons, and there's strong evidence that they actually do. It's like one of those secrets that you try to keep in, and then everybody's like, but we know you have it, or we know you did it. So what are you trying to hide? But another nation that was kind of like that is the last nation on this video, North Korea. On September 3rd, 2017, North Korea detonated a device which caused a magnitude 6.1 tremor consistent with a low-powered thermonuclear detonation. But North Korea may actually have more than triple the number of nuclear weapons than what experts recently estimated. And according to a story by the Washington Post, the current number of nuclear weapons that they have is 60. Okay, so the first nation I'm going to be mentioning is South Africa. But you're probably wondering, like, wait a minute, aren't there only 9 countries in the world that have nuclear capabilities? Well, a lot of people forget about South Africa. Now, South Africa is the only country to have built nuclear weapons and then voluntarily dismantled them. So back in the 1980s, South Africa constructed 6 gun-type nuclear weapons, and they had started building a 7th one. Now, South Africa ended its nuclear weapons program in the year 1989, and all the bombs, the 6 constructed as well as the 1 under construction, were dismantled, and South Africa acceded to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons when South African Ambassador to the United States, Harry Shorts, acceded to the treaty in 1991. Now on August 19, 1994, after completing its inspection, the Internal Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that 1 partially completed as well as 6 fully completed nuclear weapons had in fact been dismantled. So yeah, the capabilities are there, but they don't have any nuclear weapons currently in their possession, although they did have them. So that's why I said this was a little bit of a special entry in this list. On September 3rd, 2017, North Korea detonated a device that caused a magnitude 6.1 tremor, consistent with a low-powered thermonuclear detonation. But North Korea may actually have more than triple the number of nuclear weapons than what experts recently estimated, and that's according to a story by the Washington Post. Their current estimated number is 60 nuclear weapons. Israel is the next nation that we're going to be looking at. Israel has not publicly conducted a nuclear test. They haven't used their nuclear weapons in war yet, and they say that it will not be the first to introduce nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Nevertheless, Israel is universally believed to possess nuclear arms, although it's unclear exactly how many. The estimated number suggests around 80 nuclear weapons. India's first tested their nuclear explosive devices back in the year 1974. Now the test spurred Pakistan to ramp up work on its secret nuclear weapons program as well. India and Pakistan both publicly demonstrated their nuclear weapon capabilities with a round of tit-for-tat, so to speak, nuclear tests in May of 1998. The current number for India is 130 nuclear weapons. Now of course, you probably saw this coming. Pakistan's nuclear program dates back to the 1970s and was spurred on, of course, by India's first nuclear test in the year 1974. Pakistan is believed to house a nuclear arsenal of 130 to 140 nuclear warheads, and Pakistan is currently expanding its nuclear arsenal faster than any other country, as well as developing new delivery systems for its warheads. And like I mentioned, the number is roughly 140. So China tested its first nuclear weapon device called the 596 in the year 1964 at the Lopner test site. The weapon was developed as a deterrent against both the United States and the Soviet Union. 2 years later, China had a fission bomb capable of being put onto a nuclear missile. Their current number sits at 270 nuclear weapons. France tested its first nuclear weapon in the year 1960, and it was based mostly on its own research. It was motivated to become a nuclear power in order to retain great power status alongside the United Kingdom during the post-colonial Cold War. Their current number of nuclear weapons sits at a total of 300. France has been one of the topmost countries that have urged everyone else on the importance of nuclear deterrence in a highly dangerous world. So check it out, UK is the next nation. So the United Kingdom was the 3rd country in the world after the United States and the Soviet Union to develop and test nuclear weapons. Now its program was motivated to have an independent deterrent against the Soviet Union, while also maintaining its status as a great power. Their current number is 215 nuclear weapons. The next nation I'm going to be mentioning is Russia. The former Soviet Union was the 2nd nation to have developed and tested a nuclear weapon. The direct motivation for the Soviet weapons development was to achieve a balance of power during the Cold War. After the dissolution in 1991, the Soviet weapons entered officially into the possession of the Russian Federation. Their nuclear weapon arsenal is said to number 7,000. Now, just a note, approximately 93% of all nuclear warheads are owned by Russia and the United States. No other nuclear armed state sees a need for more than a few hundred nuclear weapons for national security. So United States and Russia, they of course way exceed that number. And now the number 1 nation is the United States. Now the United States developed the first nuclear weapon during World War II in cooperation with the United Kingdom as well as Canada as part of the Manhattan Project, out of fear that Nazi Germany would develop them first. The US remains the only country to have used nuclear weapons in war, devastating the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now today the United States has anywhere between 6,800 and 7,000 nuclear weapons. Alright, so starting Starting off with the first nation at number 10, we have Saudi Arabia with the Saudi Arabian Army. Saudi Arabia surpasses Egypt for the 10th spot of the largest armies in the world. There's a huge amount of money that's being spent on the Saudi Arabian army every single year, and it means that the country has one of the best equipped armed forces. They have a total active personnel of 478,000. Now, the Royal Saudi Land Forces are composed of 3 armored brigades, 5 mechanized brigades, 1 airborne brigade, 1 Royal Guard brigade, and 8 artillery battalions. The army also has 1 aviation command with 2 aviation brigades. Moving on to number 9, we have Vietnam with the People's Army of Vietnam. Vietnam ranks number 9 in this episode with a total active personnel count of 482,000 people. Now, in the backdrop of the resurgent China, the Social Republic of Vietnam has been strengthening its armed forces. Now, the organizations and establishment of the People's Army of Vietnam started way back in 1944, all to remove the French colonial forces as well as the Japanese occupiers under the guidance of Ho Chi Minh. Their army is made up of course, their ground force, their navy, their air force, the border defense force, as well as coast guards. However, Vietnam does not have a separate ground force or army branch. It's kind of like all put together in one. Number 8 brings us Iran with their Islamic Republic of Iran army. Iran comes in at number 8 in this episode, and they have a total active personnel of 523,000. When it comes to the modern history of Iran, the Iranian army was founded about 100 years ago, and the current form, the Islamic Republic, is a little less younger than that. Now, their headquarters are located in Tehran, Iran, and the mission is to protect territorial integrity of the Iranian state from external and internal threats. Now, the Iranian army, or the Artesh as they're called in Persian, has its own joint staff which coordinates its 4 separate service branches, and those are the ground forces, air force, the navy, and there's also the air defense forces. South Korea comes in at number 7, and their army is the Republic of Korea Army. They have a total active personnel count of 625,000. Now, the Republic of Korea Armed Forces was founded on August 15th, 1948, and their headquarters are in Seoul, South Korea. They were formally organized into 3 armies, the 1st Army, the 3rd Army, and the 2nd Operational Command. Now, each of them had their own headquarters, their own corps, and their own divisions. After restructuring, though, the 2nd Army was converted as the 2nd Operations Command, and that was in the year 2007, and the 1st and the 3rd Armies were merged as the Ground Operations Command, and that happened very recently in 2019. The Pakistan Army is at number 6, and they have a total personnel count of 654,000. Their army came into existence on August 14th, 1947, and it has its headquarters in Rawalpindi, Pakistan. The army's primary objective is of national security and national unity. And the Pakistani army is a voluntary force, and the army during disasters and emergency conducts humanitarian rescue operations at home, as well as participates in peacekeeping missions in different parts of the world. Pakistan also has the most amount of women in an army among the Islamic countries. Alright, so moving on to number 5, we have the ground forces of the Russian Federation. Russia has a total active personnel count of 1,013,628, and of course it's 5th on this list. The army was founded in the year 1992, and its major structural reorganization began in the year 2009. The Russian Ministry of Defense has its own headquarters at Moscow, and the main command of the ground forces consists of the main staff of the ground troops and the department force for peacekeeping forces. There's also the armaments of the ground troops and the rare services of the ground troops. There's the cadres of the ground forces troops, indoctrination work, as well as military education. And the branches of service include motorized rifles, tanks, artillery and rocket forces, troop air defense, special corps, reconnaissance signals, radio electronic warfare, engineering, nuclear, biological and chemical protection, logistical support, automobile, as well as the protection of their rear. There's also military units and logistics establishments. A whole lot going on in Russia's army. The nation coming at number 4 is North Korea. Their army is called the Korean People's Army Ground Forces. Now, North Korea has a total active personnel of 1,280,000. Their army is believed to have been founded back in the year 1932, and their headquarters are located at Pyongyang in North Korea. Their army consists of 5 branches. There's the ground force, the navy, the air force, and the strategic rocket forces, as well as the special operations. All right, guys, 3 nations left, and coming in at the number 3 spot, we have the United States with the United States Army. So the United States is very well equipped, and it has a total active personnel count of 1,281,900 people. The Army was founded over 200 years ago, and the U.S. Army is the 3rd largest in the entire world. Now, the mission of the Army includes preserving the peace and security, as well as providing for the defense of the United States and the Commonwealths, as well as the possessions and areas occupied by the United States. Now, its headquarters are at Arlington County in Virginia in the United States, and it's the largest military branch of the United States Armed Forces. The Army is part of the Department of the Army, which is one of 3 military departments of the Department of Defense. But moving on to the nation at number 2 with the second largest army in the world, the Indian Army. They have a total active personnel count of 1,362,500. Their army headquarters are located in New Delhi, India, and initially the army's objective was to defend the nation's frontiers. Now, over the years now, the responsibility of protecting the country internally began to develop more and more. It has an all-volunteer force, and it comprises of more than 80% of the country's active defense personnel. The Army is still looking to expand, as they have embarked on an infantry modernization program known as Futuristic Infantry Soldier as a System. And it's also requiring new assets for its armored artillery as well as aviation branches. But India is not large enough to take the number 1 spot, because that goes to China and their People's Liberation Army Ground Forces. So China's troops total at 2,183,000. Their mission, of course, is to ensure that China is secured and stays safe. With the continuous advancements in the types of army equipment, as well as having the 2nd largest defense budget in the entire world, China ain't playing around. The Army is the largest as well as the oldest branch of the Republic of China's armed forces, and there are 13 core-sized army groups of China since the end of April 2017. Now, they're divided among 5 theater commands: the Eastern, Southern, Northern, Western, and Central commands. Within the theater command, starting in 2011, the divisions are being downsized into full brigades: armored, mechanized infantry, field artillery, air defense artillery, engineering, as well as logistical brigades. All right, guys, so starting at number 10, we have the country of Brazil. Brazil's armed forces are the 2nd largest in the Americas after the United States, and the largest in Latin America and the Southern Hemisphere by military power. They have taken steps to really modernize their military over the years. All military branches of the Brazilian Armed Forces are part of the Ministry of Defense, and the Brazilian Navy, which is the oldest of the Brazilian Armed Forces, includes the Brazilian Marine Corps and the Brazilian Naval Aviation. Their total active personnel sit at 360,000. The country we're going to look at next at number 9 is the country of Pakistan. The armed forces were formed in the year 1947 when Pakistan became independent from the British Empire. And since then, their military forces have gone through a lot. They have played a decisive role in the history of Pakistan, protecting its sense of national pride and unity and identity, and also dealing with their rival nation next door to them. Their active personnel sits at 640,000. Pakistan successfully conducted and demonstrated its publicly announced nuclear tests in the year 1998. The tests were codenamed Chagai 1 followed by Chagai 2, and they were performed in direct response to India's nuclear test Pokhran 2. Yeah, that's the neighbor that I'm talking about there. They've had a rivalry going on from way back. Pakistan became the 7th nation in the world to achieve the status of a nuclear power. That brings us to number 8, the United Kingdom. with a relatively small number of active military personnel of just 194,000, as well as a small number of aircraft and tanks, the United Kingdom still holds the 8th spot on this list. The British military does have an advantage when it comes to its geographical boundaries. And, just looking at a century ago, Great Britain was considered to be the world's strongest military. British soldiers were equipped with some of the latest weapons at the time, and today they still play a leading role in military power and are among the nations who have become a nuclear power state. The country next at number 7 is France. Although France doesn't hold an impressive number of ships, tanks, and planes, yet it still holds more advanced and efficient military equipment than some other countries. Rafale and Mirage jets, as well as Leclerc main battle tanks, Tiger helicopters, as well as being one of the only nations to be included in the exclusive club of being a nuclear power. Well, yeah, France's military has a whole lot of muscle behind it. A great portion of French military equipment is manufactured in France, so it's domestic, and it shows that France, as an independent nation, they can really produce their own weapons during wartime. They don't have to rely on any other nation. Their total active personnel sit at 205,000. We're going to be looking at South Korea next. Having more than 550,000 active military personnel, South Korea holds the 6th spot in terms of the most powerful military. South Korea maintains a large, well-equipped armed forces establishment consisting of Army, Navy, as well as Air Force branches, although it's still considerably smaller than that of the North Korean military. But the Army is by far the largest component when it comes to South Korea's military power. They also have a very sizable reserve force, which is another 500,000. Yeah, these guys got a whole lot of manpower. Halfway into number 5, we look at Japan. The Japanese people feel a sense of pride as having one of the strongest militaries in the world. Japan is considered the 7th biggest in military spending in the world. They spend over $47 billion US on their military annually. Having the 6th biggest air fleet in the world, Japan stands among the strongest countries. It has more than 240,000 active military personnel, and Japan has not only one of the strongest militaries, but also has the advanced and latest arms technology at their disposal. Japan is growing in all ways when it comes to military power, as well as just on the global scale in general. Moving on now to number 4, this country is India. Having a great amount of aircraft, tanks, and navy, India holds the 4th spot in the strongest militaries. India does have the 2nd largest active military personnel in the world. India and Pakistan are great rivals, like I mentioned earlier, and this really serves as fuel to continually ramp up their military. Although India has not released any official statements about the size of its nuclear arsenal, there are some estimates that suggest that India has 160 nuclear weapons and has produced enough weapon-grade plutonium for up to 200 nuclear weapons. Next up, we're looking at China. This is the largest country in the world when it comes to population. It also has the 2nd largest military budget, spending $250 billion US annually. When it comes to active personnel, China holds the number 1 spot with 2 million active personnel. China has some of the most advanced and latest weapons that exist on the planet, and with the largest population in the world, as well as a strong economy, as well as becoming a nuclear power state, China boasts considerable power on the global scale, and it's definitely not a nation that you want to mess with. Of course, Russia and America have been great rivals when it comes to the military. Russia is considered to be the world's largest oil-producing country, and it has a large navy as well as great military statistics all around. When it comes to the number of military personnel, Russia holds the 5th spot, and their military budget is 3rd in the world. Matter of fact, their active military personnel is 850,000. Russia also has nuclear weapons in its possession, and their special operations forces, as well as a whole lot of propaganda, they're really taking over and invading Ukraine as we speak. And the fact that they're able to take such aggressive action and bold action it proves that they can definitely defend themselves when facing any backlash. Now, to top this list, we have the United States of America. It's definitely not a big surprise. Most of you, I'm sure, would have guessed that they would be number one. But the United States is spending more than $770 billion annually on its military services. That is crazy. That's over 3 times more than China's overall military budget. The American military is behind both India and China when it comes to available manpower, with 1,390,000 active personnel. However, it does hold the number on spot for being far superior when it comes to its air power, as well as its influence globally and its sizable nuclear arsenal.